Three, two, one. Let's go! Skippo! We back! Skippo! We back.
Dude.
Bang, bang.
What? Come on. We are back. We are back live for some geophysics on this episode. It's really good. P-Dog was all excited. I saw you back there.
That was really entertaining for
Dude.
me. Definitely.
Dude. My brain kind of exploded.
I mean, it was the CEO and president of Dawson Geophysical on the mic, dropping knowledge and crazy wisdom from the mentors he had.
Yeah.
Decker, Dawson, and all the how he kept that business in control was incredible.
Not only that, but the fact that he went from getting hired in a downturn, right, to being boots on the ground,
right,
to now being the man, the myth,
right,
ish,
the jumper,
the jumper,
the man, the myth-ish, the jumper,
the president and CEO of Dawson Geophysical.
That was incredible, man. What an opportunity for us to sit down with somebody like that had that just incredible knowledge, man. The amount of experience that he's gone through on the service side, and the way he ends the show, dude. Oh my gosh, man. We talked about all the service side, right? Put the whole cloud of service side on this thing, and for E&P and being on the operating side our whole careers.
We don't think about that.
Right. We have no idea what the struggles are. We have no idea what those internal conversations are like, and he just gave us a huge insight on that.
The survey is shot, and then we take a step back. It's like, all right, now we step up, and we start interpreting. But we don't think about, what's Dawson doing now?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess that's why they have the job. We got to trust that service side, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
100%.
But, and I mean, there's a reason why Dawson has survived the last freaking 3 biggest downturns.
Yeah, since the 50s,
dude.
Yeah,
since the 50s.
I mean, when you think of acquisitions, Dawson in the Permian.
Yeah, man.
100%.
Yeah. No, and Jumper just bleeds this very, very like lineage type feel to me.
Dude.
He bleeds like
West Texas born and raised.
Yeah, dude.
Odessa native.
You know what? There's something to be said for that, man. There's something to be said for growing up in this city and specifically growing up through any part of the oil and gas industry. Mike Party, right? Just the whole career of this industry in this town. There's something to be said for that, and it's incredible, man. What an honor for us to be able to sit there, man. I was blown away, man. The most of the time, and some of that seismic stuff goes over my head, man. I'm not a geophysics, right? I'm not a geophysicist.
Dude, I'm digging. I'm digging through the files. Dude, I'm like, I remember that term. Watch me nod. But at the same time, he'd always bring us back in.
He really did, man. Yeah. He really did. So the show was fantastic. What do we got coming up? We got URTEC coming up. That's going to be exciting, man. We're going to be doing a show there out of the booth of Icon. That's going to be exciting. I mean, I just shaved my fucking head, right? I'm completely bald now.
You're ripping Joe Rogan right now. the Troy Tittlemeyer experience.
I think we have a Permian Joe Rogan.
And here's what I was thinking. So I could do the hat, right? Like Rogan does sometimes, right? You can rock the dome. How does that look?
That looks way better than the bald head.
It does?
Dude. It does.
Your head is shining less now.
It's... I mean, we don't get the 3 wishes if we rub it, but it looks good. It looks good.
Okay, so I can rock the hat every now and then, so it's not, weird, right? And then we had a total experience with Howard Stern parlay in this show.
I'm changing my name
Robin, go on.
I need to watch that movie.
Robin, you're strong, independent.
I was getting bullied the whole podcast about that name.
Yeah, you were sitting right behind him. He couldn't see you, and he was like, "Man, it's like a Robin from
Howard Stern."
Howard Stern.
And then we knew about it, and I felt like it was an inside joke on this table. It was good stuff.
Oh, yeah, no, dude, Robin,
it was a pleasure.
It's
Thanks,
all
man.
Good, man. It's all
Pleasure's
good.
all mine.
You did a fantastic job on the TV, and really, I mean, the show was just fascinating. It had all to do with where we are in this industry, really technically and business side. It was fascinating, man.
Well, from the technical side, it was how are we not leveraging this data the way we need to be leveraging it as well. So it's good stuff, man. And it kind of takes us back to, even he sees it, we need to get back to the rock.
That's right. He said G&G, we got to integrate. Everybody's got to come together.
Not only it's not a drilling program.
That's right.
Only anymore. It's not a geology program anymore. We have to integrate, man.
We have to integrate. And without further ado, we got to start this show.
Yep.
Mr. Jumper, we on the way.
Well, hell of a deal. I think it's time to start the conception segment of the show.
Let's get into it.
And for the conception segment, we always bring up our primary sponsor and conception segment sponsor, TGS. TGS provides global subsurface data products and services to the energy industry through investments in multi-client data projects, from seismic data to imaging services and well data. TGS has the world's most complete digital log library with 5 times more digital well logs in North America than their closest competitor and 7 times more in the Permian Basin alone. Furthermore, they're doing something called the RLAS or ARLAS. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, but it's Analytics Ready LAS. And what this is they're combining their expansive library of log data and digital logs with machine learning technology to predict well curves and the responses of well curves, like a synthetic sonic for seismic people, in areas where those wells and that data didn't exist before.
Yeah.
And TGS is subsurface intelligence that you can trust, Skips.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that time to depth relationship, especially when you're wildcatting,
Right.
you know, I don't know where you are in New Mexico or somewhere in the Permian, whatever have you, right? Being able to be on depth or have an idea is crucial.
Yeah, if you got 2 sonics and then all of a sudden you got 15 more synthetic sonics to tie into your seismic, I mean, I'll take it.
It gives you a little bit more confidence, I'll say that.
And then another thing with Jumper in the room with Geo News, and that's a TGS product. It's basically just keeping track of all the technical information. They have business and kind of government data in this thing too. A lot of interesting drop-down boxes with this.
Don't quote me on that. I think so.
Because that's BP, and then it's Chevron, COP, Chesapeake, Devon. It's got to be Apache, but something happened in
I think that's Anadarko.
I think it's Anadarko.
Oh, Anadarko Petroleum. Okay,
Is that Anadarko?
I think so. I think that
would be the Oxy announcement, wouldn't it?
okay.
That would make sense. That
in
spike.
April. Yeah, that spike. Come on, Jumper. It's nothing to you.
A beginner.
So this is GeoNews. You can break down into kind of anything daily. And what I thought was kind of cool, we'll jump to upstream, throw in seismic, hit search, and it's going to span the globe on all the reports that they have. As we have CEO of Dawson in the room, obviously, we're going to dive down into some seismic information. And it goes around the globe, and it's basically telling us where seismic shoots are taking place. I mean, we're shaking kind of all over the place. And I'm assuming that that's all Dawson.
Yeah.
All Dawson and only Dawson.
That's us.
The Permian, South America. They got something happening up here in Russia, which is interesting.
Ooh. Siberia.
So, north central Russia, recoverable oil reserves increased by 8%. Okay, so this is like happening in the Permian. Everyone's talking about recovery factors and increasing. So field increased 8%.
I need to get out more. Is this a subscription based?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's right. I don't know how much it costs, but you can just in the morning you're dropping deuce, having your coffee, and all of a sudden you know what's been going on. What's going on? Recoverable oil in this part of the war. Okay, belonging to this guy. How do you say that, P-Dog? Let's give that a shot. Go for it.
Human gas.
Just say
That's so wrong.
just say big word.
Big word. Big Russian word.
Big
The
word,
increase of hydrocarbon potential of the project became possible thanks to the performance of 3D seismic and the drilling of 3 prospective and exploration wells and 164 commercial wells. Wow, cool. It's got to relate to the seismic, man. There's something special happening in that data. There's no question about it. Oh, here's a Permian. Related news, Permian Watch.
Don't read that one.
America's hottest shale.
Don't read that one.
It's slowing down.
Let's move on. We don't need that.
Not one for the morning read. Anyway, that's GeoNews. So you pop it open. You can set these parameters of where you're interested in. You can set what you're interested in, which companies you're interested in, like that Carrizo and Callan deal. Yeah. Any of that stuff just pops up, and it's just news after news. It's good. It always brings us content for the show. Anything off the cuff that you want to dive down into, Skips or P-Dog, before we move on?
Go back up.
What happens if you zoom into Permian?
Yeah, let's see what's going on in the Permian.
Well, we know what's going on in the Permian.
I know what's going on in that yellow.
Yeah, right around here, Dawson Geophysical Company.
Don't read that either.
Don't read that.
Is this not the 850 square mile best seismic shoot ever being shot in the Permian? Is that what?
We're on it now.
Yeah.
Yeah, Stoney kind of touched on it yesterday. He said that he's really, really excited about it.
What did he call it? He said the biggest. How did he say it?
Wait, it was the biggest resolution in terms of seismic.
Yeah.
Right.
I think
the
it's
highest resolution seismic.
I think it was the biggest single shoot. Because, I mean, all the majority of the shoots in the Permian are all merged together. Right? So
when you're talking about the seismic surveys and how big they are, you have to figure out what you're using as a metric. Mm-hmm. Is it square miles? Is it number of channels? Is it density? Is it those types of things?
And I think he was talking about squares in particular.
And that one is it's a large 3-component job. So total channel count on it somewhere around 132,000, something like that. So
what the hell?
So it's big.
So when you say 3-component, it's recording VS?
Yes, C wave. Yep.
Gotcha.
Yeah, converted wave. Yep.
That's a big deal for a geophysicist.
If you can process it.
Once you can figure out how to get it processed and get it, event registered.
Right.
It would be very helpful. So, but there's enough control in this area that you got a better chance with it. So, and the multi-component processing's come a long way in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm. No kidding. That's computer power. That's simply that. Wow.
I mean, we used to talk about putting data out on 9-track tapes, and we may get into some of this later, and we're putting out petabytes of data now.
Yeah. I mean, it's almost instantaneous, too, because, I mean, we'll go into more detail about that, but when your team was breaking down, the amount of data that comes in and how it's being stored, backup after backup after backup.
Yeah,
what a process.
It's fantastic.
What a process. Okay, I think that's the segue, obviously, back and right into Jumper.
The man.
The
Jumper.
There you go. Yeah, I've been called all kinds of things.
How long you been in Midland?
35 years.
35 years in Midland. Whew. How did you get here?
Well, I was born in Odessa.
Oh, no kidding.
Don't go telling everybody that. My mother and father divorced, and my mother remarried, and we moved off to northern Illinois. Mm-hmm. And my dad was always in Odessa, so I would come back and spend summers and whatnot in Odessa. And after I graduated from high school, I went to one semester of junior college up in Illinois. My stepfather was an educator, was an administrator at the junior college level, so I went to school there and said, I don't want to do this anymore. Moved to Texas and went with my dad. Went one semester at Odessa College and transferred to the University of Texas at Austin. So my wife is from Odessa, so I got out of school in December of '84, and things were pretty tough in December of '84, '85, '86 time frame, and I was lucky to find a position and was fortunate enough to get hired with Dawson in October of '84. Started January 2nd, 1985.
No kidding.
So we both kind of want to be back in the area.
Yeah.
And so, I've seen Midland.
I was going to say, you being born and raised here, because the majority of us, we're all transplants. We're all from somewhere else.
Yeah, we've all noticed.
Yeah, if you can't tell. If you can't tell. But what was it like growing up here and just seeing this town go through the ups and downs and of oil, oil price at 100?
When I was growing up, Odessa was more of the service town. Mm-hmm. Midland was more of the E&P town.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, the old adage was that, you raised your kids in Midland, raised hell in Odessa. And so it was two distinct communities. And it's actually, they've done a better job of coming together in the last 20 years than they did back then. But you really didn't venture to Midland much if you were in Odessa. But, being young, I didn't notice the up and downs as much because I didn't have anybody in my family or my dad or my stepfather, either one, were involved in oil and gas. One was an educator. My stepdad was an educator. My father was a individual loan officer at a bank, so he was just making car loans. I guess car loans defaulted in down times and stuff like that.
Sure.
But none of our livelihood was ever actually tied to the oil and gas business, with the exception of my grandfather, who was a driller. But I really didn't notice it until I got out here in 1984. In '84, we'd had the big oil collapse of '82, I believe, that took oil prices from roughly mid 30s down to $8, and Midland just went to hell. Banks closed. First National Bank defaulted or went under. Biggest bank in the state of Texas to go under. A lot of banks went under. The FDIC owned 30% of the houses in Midland.
Whoa!
Wow.
Just on takebacks. Because the other thing that was going on in the early '80s was it wasn't just the oil price collapse, but the bank collapse. But interest rates on homes in the late '70s, when the boom here really started, would be in the 12, 13, 14% range. It was huge. And so people couldn't afford 13% interest on a house, and so these banks had come up with adjustable rate mortgages. And basically what you did was you came in at 5%, but that differential at 8% was adding to the principal. And so as the area started to deteriorate financially, as prices were coming down on homes, the big problem was your principal was going up because of this adjustable rate mortgage, and so everybody just
walked away.
You would buy houses, buildings. The FDIC came out and set up offices out here, and the first house we bought was in '86, and we bought it from the FDIC, and so that was a really, really tough collapse. And so,
who was president? Is that Ford?
No, it was
The little guy?
It was Reagan.
Oh, it was Reagan.
Yeah, the Carter administration's the one.
Carter
Reagan
was
was
right
elected
before
in '80. And there's all kinds of theories on what happened with the oil price collapse, but one theory going around is Reagan utilized it to break the Russians.
Really?
That it was a political move. So a lot of different things went on then. And me being the genius that I am and having my thumb right on the heart of things, I had the bright idea when I got out of high school that I was going to go to pharmacy school. Now, can you picture me sitting behind a pharmacy counting pills out for,
Oh my gosh, sir! So, what's the side effect?
Yeah. If it lasts 4 hours or longer, go to the doctor. But I got down to University of Texas, and I took this class called organic chemistry. Did you guys ever take that?
Oh man,
and I'm in there with a whole bunch of these, a bunch of guys that were going to go be doctors, and I said, this isn't going to be for me. I quit. So I was working in a pharmacy in Odessa, and one of the pharmacists there had told me that she knew a guy down at UT that had gone and gotten a degree in geophysics, and it's such a popular field in the oil and gas business that they were hiring people in the hallways of the university wearing shorts and flip-flops. I said, well, hell, I can do that. And so I didn't know much about it, got down there and got excited about it, and while I was not paying attention, the oil business went to hell. And so I was now having this degree that,
coming out in a downturn.
Might as well been a philosophy degree because it was unemployable, right? And so
art history or
and so I know we're off topic here, but I had gotten married in '83, and so last year and a half or last 2 years of school, I guess I was, my wife and I were going to school and working, and I was working for a beer distributor. And making $1,100 a month, and thought I had robbed Fort Knox. I had so much money. And anyway, she says, I'd like to go to Midland. And I said, well, there's nobody going to, hire anybody in Midland, but I'll go check. So I told my professor on Wednesday in October, I said, hey, I'm going to be gone Friday. I'm going to Midland to get a job. And he said, who are you interviewing with? And I said, well, I'm interviewing with GSI, Western, and GeoSearch. And he said, go by and see Decker Dawson. I was, well, who's Decker Dawson? Well, he's got a little service company out there, Dawson Geophysical. He's on our advisory board. It'd be a good spot for you. So that's how I got introduced. I got very lucky. I was very lucky to have a job. I've been there ever since, which some people say I'm unemployable. So, anyway, we got off topic.
No, that was kind of spot on, yeah, because along that way, you were certainly inspired by certain people, and you met, obviously, Mr. Dawson himself. I'm assuming is that the guy who started this thing?
Yes, the Dawson was formed in 1952 by Decker Dawson as a sole proprietorship.
And he just kind of took you in and...
He did, and the company was actually founded and formed during a downturn. He was working for, I think it was Republic at the time, and Forest Oil wanted to put out another crew, and they wouldn't do it. And so he went to Forest Oil and says, if I get my own deal, will you put me in business? And they said, sure. So his first contract was with Forest, and a year later, another downturn hit, and so the company survived a whole bunch of them. But I was hired directly by Decker and worked alongside him for 30 plus years, and sorry to say he passed away in February of 18.
Oh shoot! Just recently, man. Jeez.
Yeah. He at the age of 97.
Wow.
And he had. He had been still coming to the office as of December.
Wow. What the heck? Still kind of active? Or
No, he really wasn't active. He needed a place to go, and we liked having him, but
sure.
He
That's
probably
him?
Hadn't been active. That's him.
Son of a gun.
I believe that was when he was president of the
SEG.
SEG, yeah.
Damn, man, 89 and
97, he won the Enterprise Award from the SEG.
Wow.
He's got a big trophy room.
Oh,
I can imagine.
Go to the obituary. Go back one. His daughter and I did that at Opal's.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Sat there together. His daughter and I are very close.
Sheesh, man.
Good guy. There's he was Midland. I mean, that generation, those guys. You ask about, what it was like. Those were the type of guys that built Midland, Texas.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
If you go around town, their names are on everything.
Oh, yeah.
They're on the Midland Community Theater. Their names are on the hospital. Their names are on the Wagner Noel. Anything that Midland Country Club, the Petroleum Club. Decker actually was president when they moved the Petroleum Club into the facility that they're in now. And so... Mm-hmm. You had a group of guys that were dedicated to putting their own money into making Midland the community that it is, mm-hmm. and I think we've got some guys in town starting to do that again. So
it's a rare breed, but
that's right. Yeah, must be. Yeah, what was something that just stood out different about him than the rest of the people that you got to work with or get mentored by? I mean, what was it about him that just? How was he? He's just obviously so successful. He's a smart businessman.
He was a civil engineer from Oklahoma A&M.
Oklahoma A&M.
That's a first.
Yeah, it's actually Oklahoma State now.
Okay,
but it was Oklahoma A&M when he went there, and he got a degree in civil engineering. Couldn't find a civil engineering job, and he took a job with Magnolia as a geophysical helper, and they moved him out to Texas, and he later on went to work for Republic, and he's been here ever since. And there's a description. Ron Ginner, who used to be with Chevron here years ago, described him as a gentleman's gentleman. Mm-hmm. He was a smart guy, a funny guy, very strong humor, good wit. Mm-hmm. A true gentleman's gentleman. He would come spend Thanksgiving and Christmas with us at the house, and that's the way our family would describe him, as just a gentleman. I've never been around anybody more honest You know, his motto was "Do it right," and if you do it wrong, tell somebody. And you know, so the company has always kind of been
with that kind of
that
kind of foundation, there's a reason Dawson has made it through all those downturns. It's just
yeah. He used to tell me, you can do something stupid, just don't do anything incredibly stupid. That's the kind of advice he would give you. And every once in a while I come up with a bright idea, and he would say, would you give me 24 hours where you do that? I'd say, for what? He said, so I can sell all my stock. That's incredibly stupid. So he was a great mentor. Wow. I had another mentor at Dawson that ran he was vice president of data processing, Hal Pardue. He passed away in May of 18.
Son of a gun,
last
man.
year.
He lost them both pretty quick.
He was he's the one I actually interviewed with, and he was a great mentor. And there's been some great people in this business over the years. The seismic business has always been tough. It's always been a tough place to make a living. It's tough work on those guys, but it's a really good people business. Mm-hmm. It's a small industry, small groups, tight knit families. Yeah. I mean,
So you get hired kind of on the processing side, or you're out there putting vibes in
explain that journey. So you get hired on. What's your position where you start, and how do you climb that ladder?
I started out in data processing, and really had no idea what I was doing. I mean, just kind of managed to get my way through school, and I don't know how. The University of Texas really isn't sure how I got out. In fact, Milo Back is my professor. I saw him at an SCG one time, like it was 1990, and he said, what are you up to these days? I said, I'm still with Dawson. He said, well, that's kind of surprising. So that's a kind of...
Thanks, Professor. I really appreciate that support.
You remember me. I was the one that was asleep in the back of the room. No, but I started... take that down. I started out in data processing and processing 2D lines. And
Permian or
mostly Permian.
Okay.
Yeah, back in the 80s and 90s, most of our work was in the Permian area. We didn't. Decker one time drew the company had worked all over the country over the years, but back then he had decided that he had a 250-mile radius, and says we're never going outside that 250-mile radius of Midland. And he told us, don't you ever cross Interstate 35 going the other way. And so we had been all over the world, or not the world, but the country. But we had kind of, during the 70s and 80s, kind of had contracted back into a Permian player. So people began to think that we were just a Permian company. But most of the work we were doing was, I started out doing 2D processing in the Permian, and then was involved early on when 3D surveys first started to. I think the first one we did was probably in about 88 or 89, something like that. Mm-hmm. And then by the early 90s, we were doing everything 3D. But we had to do all that 3D processing with 2D software.
Oh, whoa.
So you didn't know. I mean, nobody really had 3D processing software. So you would kind of take a migration, for example, instead of having a 3D migration, you would migrate everything one direction and one line at a time.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh!
And then you'd sort it, rotate it, and migrate it the other way. So instead of going,
that sounds like a nightmare.
Instead of going from here,
as far as like the person doing that work,
the surveys. I mean, you have to think about this. The surveys, we had bins every 110 feet, and so, man, a big survey was, 6 square miles. Yeah. And so the data volume, it'd be a 12-fold survey. Yeah. And now you're talking bins every 41 1/4 feet with fold of, 1,000 or 500 to 1,000. And back then it was 12-fold data right in the middle. And, the line spacings were half a mile. And so they were very, very sparse. And so there weren't that many lines. There'd be 48 lines per square mile in each direction. So if you had 2 miles, you'd have, 96 by 96. So it wasn't that much data. All hand-picked. You print it out on a fan fold paper, and you'd flip it over. There'd be line 1. They'd map it or use colored pencils, and then line 2 and draw a map by hand. We'd give them a little grid, and they'd kind of make up their grid. We really didn't have the grids tied to land grid, or the survey grid tied to land grids like they are now. So, but I did that probably until maybe 94 time frame, then became technical services manager.
It's a really good year.
If you tell me that was, I know where this is going.
Yeah.
I know where. You see, now we're already into old jokes. We're not even 15 minutes in, and we're into old jokes.
Come on, Skip.
No disrespect. No disrespect. I'm just saying. It was a good year for a lot of things.
The whole fundamental concepts of seismic and processing, it makes sense. It does. And there's a lot of assumptions being made along the way to get us that final visual that we get today. And it seems to be obviously the best thing we got, but there have been a lot of complaints, and now it's where's the industry going, right? How are we getting it better? How do we know that that's the reflector at the top of the wolf camp and we're at that depth? Because when the driller's going off his azimuth and GPS at the drill bit, they're relying on us and like, hey, it looks like you're in zone, and cuttings come back and you're like, what the hell? I'm not sure if we're in zone, and there's just depth issue. There's all kinds of crazy issues that come with it. Is it every step of the way? Every step of the way that gets us to that final answer. You gotta have that processor who has seen it all, who's done it all. Mix that with the correct acquisition parameters and design to the target that you're trying to get. Is it? You just gotta. I don't know where I'm going with that.
Well, back in the 80s and the 90s, you were basically doing horizon specific designs. Okay, so we started out doing most of our 3D work was right here in Scurry County, looking for pinnacle reefs, and so. You could get away. Fold really didn't matter as long as you could get a pretty good structural picture of that reef. So you get away with half-mile spacings, right? Because you're very targeted. And we did some interesting things on that back before all this pre-stack depth and all these other things that are going on now. You had a velocity gradient in Scurry County from the top of the Penn Lime from the Penn Lime to the Penn Shale. Okay. It is big velocity gradient. So when you looked at these reefs down here, the dip was false. It was velocity induced dip.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Well, nobody had workstations then, and nobody had pre-stack depth migration. If you had it, it wouldn't work anyway, right? Because there wasn't enough information to do that. And so we would have interpreters go in and fit the top of the Penn Shale to well control.
Okay.
And because all this, prograding sequence, carbonate sequence above it was causing a velocity pull up on one side. We would time fit that, then migrate it. Because what we'd been doing was migrating on false time dip.
Yeah.
Right? And so there was a lot of specific things that were done in those surveys back then. And then we went to a quarter mile by quarter mile because we had enough channels to kind of double the number of channels. And someone said, we don't have to stay on section lines and half lines. We can actually cross pastures. A lot of things that we've done in the seismic space are not technically driven.
Yeah.
Like bin sizes. There's a reason why it's 220 and 330s and 110s and 82.5s are divisible into 5280, which is a mile.
Yeah.
Right. And so that industry started this way years ago, and we've just kind of gone to a half increment of. We went from 330s to 220s to 110s.
I didn't know that.
To 82 and a half, and everybody goes, well, where the hell did 82 and a half come from? Well, there's that many of them in a 5280. And so that's why this country was never able to go to the metric system. We have to reshoot the whole basin if we did that.
But it's that expertise that can, an operator can then be successful, because if, let's just say, TED Geophysical. Let's make up TED. TED knows the Bakken real well. TED comes in here and they're shooting a survey. They have no idea about the velocity pull-up and the pen. Yeah, right? That's huge. That's a huge.
And those are things that sometimes Decker told me one time. Decker had thousands of sayings. He said, "Not all progress is." Right. Yeah. And what happens with progress at times is we lose track of fundamentals. You can't run the spread offense if you can't block and tackle.
There you go.
Right. If you can't block and tackle, it doesn't matter how
fancy you can
get. I mean, you can draw stuff in the dirt all you want to if you can't do the basics. And so you go back to when I was in school. Milo Backus, who was you can look him up, very famous professor, was with GSI, developed deconvolution, took GSI into the digital world, digital processing. And so, world-renowned geophysicist. And he would always tell us in school, look for things that look different. Anomalies in seismic data mean something. Mm-hmm. Go look for them. So you can't just automatically assume that an anomaly that you see is either noise or it's meaningful. You have to go examine that a little bit, right? So let's get back to your original question. There are certain, we are not shooting target-specific surveys anymore. We are shooting tight grids, small bends, wide azimuth, with long offsets. Mm-hmm. In other words, you go back and look what we did in the 90s, it would be 8 lines of 120 channels. Now we're at 64 lines of 300 channels, right?
That's crazy.
All these algorithms that are being developed, whether it's pre-stack depth migration, which we don't do, by the way, on the processing side. It's just too big for the big shops do that. Yeah.
The big shops.
But what are we doing? All these tools, analytics, processing tools, all demand more information. They demand more statistics. Mm-hmm. Yep. It's just like having an HD TV and feeding it with an analog signal. The HD TV does no good.
That's right.
If you're not feeding it with a HDMI. The other thing about high resolution TV is it's not just the picture; it's the sound. So there are other things that get better when you get more information in. Seismically, we've got more room for attributes. We've got some multi-component uses that we can have. So we're giving, as an industry, we're giving the analytical side, the processing side, the attributes they need to make the processes better. All the processes are great if you don't, unless you fail to block and tackle.
Exactly.
Get the statics right. Make sure that from the surface, the first horizon is put together correctly, and make sure that it is as close to geologic representation as you can be. Mm-hmm. Right. We've got a ton of information to well control and shallow data. We should have that through refraction statics fitting.
Especially onshore opposed to offshore, because offshore it's real easy. Seabed versus the Permian, where I know a lot of different processors have.
Yeah, and so you've got to get statics right. You obviously have to get the velocity field right. You have to do the best you can to get the signal right. There's so many things that people just assume that when they've had it processed is done correctly.
Mm-hmm.
For example, how well do you phase tie your data to the well log?
Mm-hmm.
You'd be amazed at how many times you'll find out that, well, I'm 90 degrees out of phase. You haven't even really gone and looked at it closely. And, we used to do this for multiple times. You would phase rotate data just to see where, because you're dealing with an unstable wavelet to begin with the vibrator, right?
Yeah.
And so getting that wavelet to zero phase, just because someone says we're doing zero phase processing does not necessarily mean it's zero phase. The process is zero phase based, but you need to check the phase of the data. We had a data set one time looking for a wolf camp events down in Glasscock County, just thickenings in the wolf camp. And man, we had a nice data set at the time, and first 3 wells were no good. We'd processed it, and they came back to us, and come to find out, the interpreter at the time had the phase wrong. Phase rotated 90 degrees, everything fit. All of a sudden, all the well control fit. All of a sudden, because seismic data will look different if it's phase rotated. And so you got to have all the basics right before you can really get into some of the high-end stuff like, the 5D interpolation, pre-stack depth migration.
Yeah.
Pre-stack depth migration is interesting to me in the Permian. Subsalt, it makes a lot of sense. You've got a very large velocity field. That big salt block that you're trying to image underneath, it's there. The velocity changes, the velocity gradients in the Permian are very, very subtle.
Yeah.
And so iterating that velocity model to get that pre-stack depth migration plus or minus 10 feet, that's tough work.
Yeah.
That's tough work. Offshore, you're trying to get it plus or minus 100 feet. In the Permian, you're trying to get it tight. So I think there's a whole lot of some of this just involves more learning. I mean, if you think about what we're doing in the Permian Basin from horizontal drilling and completion, we don't have a whole lot of data to use.
We don't.
Not compared to what you did back in the 2D, early 3D days when it was all conventional structure. We're just now gathering enough logs, data sets, analogs, what worked, what didn't work. I mean, we're still early on.
Yeah, it's a whole new beast.
Yeah, we're early on. We're on the front side of the learning curve on this thing.
Yeah.
And, the closer the G&G team, the deeper into the room they can get, the more successful it's going to be.
Wow, I love that.
They just can't be in the room next door supporting. They need to be in the room with engineering, petrophysics, geochem. They've got to be there. All that relates.
That's right.
Seismic data are the one thing that brings all that together. It brings geology, brings engineering, brings petrophysics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's what geophysics is. Geophysics is the study, whether it's magnetics or whether it's seismic, it's the study of how rocks respond to different things or what kind of properties they put out in terms of magnetic or electrical or gravity, whatever the case may be. In our case, we're trying to study how do rocks respond to an acoustic wave.
Yeah.
That involves rock properties, petrophysics. It involves all those. So all we're trying to do is predict what that well log would look like in between those two wells.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. And it's nearly impossible because we just don't quite understand what
here's
this
the problem.
basin was made from.
Seismic's the best tool we've got to see the subsurface. There's not anything that's out there that we found, and not anything that's coming anytime soon. We're trying to understand the earth to a great detail using an acoustic tool in an elastic medium.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, weird.
So we're trying to image this thing acoustically. The next phase, we've gone through full wave inversions are out there now, pre-stack time migration, full elastic migrations, processing those types of things, because that wavefront moves differently than what we think it does. And so it's an elastic medium, which means we've got to figure out, and there's some processing shops doing it, that are getting this thing back more to an elastic-based process rather than acoustic. So there's some really exciting things going.
Really? How do you stay up on that?
As tough as the industry is right now on everybody, this industry is resilient. This industry continues to develop and learn. It's the most fascinating industry that I can think of. The problem with the industry now are the big boys aren't there. You don't have the Western Geophysicals. You don't have the GSIs. You don't have the big shops that did a whole lot of R&D stuff in the back room. The R&D work in the geophysical side, seismic side's been pretty well pushed back to, the majors are involved in it, but the field of folks doing full-blown R&D work isn't as big as it was 25 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
no kidding.
I got us off task.
No, man.
Are you awake over there, Robin?
Going so good.
I love it. He calls him Robin. I
really need to watch that movie.
I forwarded.
No, you don't.
You won't like the answer.
I forwarded a comment from an old-time geologist that talked about shales. I was going to read it.
Be careful using the word old-timer.
Oh, this guy's like 1800-something.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not born in 94.
No, come on. Anyway, very interesting comment on that I picked up on that I thought was interesting anyway was the fact that we're not shooting anymore for specific tasks. We're shooting over the top of this thing as big and as accurate and as wide and as packed as much data as we can possibly get, and then we start thinking, all right, how do we pull answers out of this thing? That to me tells me the industry maybe around that time had lost the ability to understand what they were expecting to find. And they just said, all right, this is a tool and it's going to tell me what's going on. I'm going to find some anomalies. I'm going to have some geologic interpretations. The engineers are going to know what's going on. We're going to go down there and we're going to try to get that hydrocarbon out of the ground. But at some point along the way, we went from chasing conventional traps, big features, big domes, whatever that was. It was a little simpler, to now doing these incredibly complex unconventionals that do not have much change in the seismic world. They don't change laterally very much, but in reality, the heterogeneity in the shales are just incredible and very, very challenging. And I think
it's not quite the manufacturing play everybody thought it was, is it?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, sir.
And that's fascinating to know that Dawson is completely understanding in that way. And you guys do you guys have some R&D going on? Do you guys?
The most of the R&D work we do is acquisition related. I mean, we're trying to find. We're working on ways to do things faster, more efficient, better ways to use a vibrator to get energy into the ground. We've got a group led by Tom Thomas up in Oklahoma City that I think he's presenting a paper at the SCG convention coming up in September in San Antonio, and he's presented several. But we've got some areas where we'll go out we've got a little small consortium industry partners that we'll go out and try different things. Like we've tried different ways of simultaneous sourcing. We've tried different ways of maybe using the vibrators in a pulse mode or a thump mode as opposed to putting in a long energy train. It just trying to get things, try to find ways to not just do it faster, but to be able to get more, as Tom puts it, more wiggles per square. Then, but for years we would pack vibrators, 4 vibrators over 220 feet and shake 8 times trying to build power. Our channel count was low, so we didn't have noise attenuation processes that worked as efficiently on 240 channels as they do on 20,000.
Yeah.
Right. And so we were having to build power by vibe. Now we're predominantly single sweep everywhere, right? 124 second, 118, 120. and we're just trying to figure out a way to spread that energy out, get as many unique image points as we can, as many unique illuminations on an image point as we can. And so most of our R&D is centered around how to better use a vibrator. We do quite a bit on multi-component sourcing. We think that a pure shear-to-shear data set tied with a good P2P data set would be very useful. The problem with the shear-to-shear is it's very expensive to source that.
Yeah.
You have to shake it 3 times, and you getting the vibrator turned sideways. To shake horizontal is a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
You're always turning it, and so the industry's kind of resorted back to acquiring multi-component C-wave data, just using P-wave sources, because it's relatively cost-effective. The cost of the equipment's a little bit more, but you only have to shoot it one time. You don't have to worry about vibrators. The problem with it is understanding what it looks like and what it means and getting it processed. And so that's most of our work. We don't do much.
Cool.
We don't do much on the data processing side.
Well, we'll get into the kind of the future and where you guys are going with that in the end of the show. But to end the conception part of the show, P-Dog, will you start working on pulling up images, just the basic idea of shaking in these vibrosizes and sending sound waves into the ground? And we want to start with the first time that Mr. Jumper went out and sat in one of those trucks and started shooting seismic and just the whole setup. I mean, you remember, and what was that like? Or do you have some good stories?
Well, very first crew visit I ever made was a crew just out here by Sprayberry, and had a permit agent, longtime friend that just retired a few years ago, took me out there to, show me the vibrators. And
Yeah.
of course, that was, totally different day. Truck mount vibrators as opposed to buggies, and showed me the line, and I didn't have any idea what it was. I had never been on one, and it was kind of interesting. And then in about 86, we had a really tough time. We'd gone down to one small 2D crew, and they decided to send a couple of us from the office out to the field to help. And so the first trip the first one that they put me on was a job out by Fort Hancock. Is it Fort Hancock? Way out west. That we were doing some work for the BEG, looking for a place to put a nuclear disposal site. And I remember sitting in a coffee shop with the guy that had taken me out there, and the guy that ran the crew, Jim Huff, was having breakfast. He looked over at me and he said, "Are you here to help or get in the way?" And I said, "Well, I'm here to help." And I laid out geophones for a half a day. And then they decided I was better suited in Midland. So I spent a half a day on that crew till I was told, "Hey, listen, we're fine. We don't need you." So about 6 months later, they decided they were going to send us out to keep us on the payroll. And Jim said, "Well, we've had that guy on a recording crew. We don't need him anymore. Can you put him somewhere else?" And they said, Jim and I became very good friends, by the way. He said, "Well, the VP said, yeah, we'll put him on a survey crew." And I got fired 5 days into the survey job. Apparently, you can't say bad words on a radio. I didn't know all those. But that was before Howard Stern. But I remember repeating a word on the radio. The guy had asked me a question, said I was tail chaining, I was holding the rod and had the back of the chain, and they had the radio, and he said, guy radioed in, said, "Ask so-and-so if the gate was locked." And was the gate locked last time you were here? He said, "I don't think so." He asked me if he wants me to lock it. You want him to lock it? Well, he doesn't give a, yeah. And so I just repeated it. And next thing I know, I got the surveyor, he's about that big, poking me in the chest, and I was back in Midland the next day. So I don't have a ton of field experience. The old name for seismic guys is doodlebugger.
Right, that's right.
And where that came from is they'd roll into town, It's kind of like a carnival. You'd come into town, do your work, and you'd leave town. These guys traveled, and they just pack all their stuff up like a doodle bug, and off they would go.
Wow.
They got in the term doodle bugger. I am not a doodle bugger, but I've worked with a bunch of them, but I have lived vicariously through the doodle bugger stories, and I've been very fortunate in my career that those guys have allowed me to be a part of their fraternity with the old field guys.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you stories for Dawson Geophysical going back 50 years as if I was there. I've heard them so many times. So.
Son of a gun. Maybe another show. Maybe another show.
So my field experience, that was my first field experience out there.
Yeah.
That's
Ours
awesome.
was all together, man. We all did this. We all went out and sat a Dawson out of all that could have been shooting. It was a Dawson shoot.
Yeah. What was the second phase? So we had the first phase shoot, and then the second phase one, we all went out there.
Yeah.
What was that guy's name?
Oh, man. Do you remember
Was it Woodrow?
Woodrow?
Yeah, Woodrow.
There's a black dude working the truck, and his name was Woodrow, and he's from Mississippi or something like that.
Yeah.
He had an old Cadillac that was just like his treasure chest. He had, I think, 5 kids, 4 different women. That dude had more life in him than most people I meet.
Oh, yeah.
And he was just loving it. He was loving it. He comes out there, he grinds it out, puts the work in, goes home and has a good time.
And just spends time with his kids and then right back out there.
And you know what? The field guy, whoever the crew leader was.
Man, I'm kind of bummed I don't remember the name.
It was Woodrow was the black dude, I think.
No, yeah, but who gave us the tour around?
Oh yeah,
I forgot his name.
Gosh, he did such a good job.
He showed us everything, how it all worked, and the amount of freaking servers you got in the middle of nowhere.
Those guys, all of our crews do a really good job of giving tour visits because we get a lot of companies that will come visit us. You know, it's not even their shoot, but they'll have some interns that are either engineers or G&G guys, whatever, and they'll come out, and they really like it. It's a good break for them from their day-to-day.
Yeah.
You know, to just be able to show people what they do, and people are always amazed that after they go out there, it's not what they thought it was.
Sure.
And I think people have a whole new respect for what those guys do.
Oh, yeah. That was,
but they love having,
the amount
they
of,
enjoy visitors.
The organization and how everything is timed. And just like, hey, by the end of the day, we should be here on track. And it's
pretty spot on.
Real. Yeah.
Pretty spot on. Now they got Raptors. They got dirt bike helmets on. Running cables. I mean, they're having a good time. And the guys running the trucks, man, the technology was really cool. It's all GPSed in, and obviously just he hit a few sequences of buttons, and all of a sudden we're shaking. And at first you're getting those large shakes, and then all of a sudden you don't even feel it. I was thinking it was going to be teeth chattering.
Aggressive. And
no, it was more like getting to the next spot was the most like gnarly part.
When you're just blowing over every mesquite tree in the way. I was like, oh, dick.
You know, when you're in an urban environment, it's not the shaking that bothers people, it's the engine noise.
Yeah.
It's that when those deck engines start revving, it gets loud.
Oh, the landowner loved it. The landowner or the lease owner, the family, they basically just said, man, you got rid of all those mesquite trees? We love it. Get them out here and shake more.
That's an old South Texas trick. You know, all that mesquite brush down in South Texas. You go down to shoot down there, and they'll just raise hell that you've got to doze a Sendero to get down it.
Yeah.
Well, that's going to cost you, right? So you pay this big permit fee for the Sendero. Then the guy goes, "Can you cut it 2 blades wide while you're here?"
While you're at it,
because on those South Texas ranches, it makes great shooting lanes.
Oh yeah,
you can't use that. It's so dense, but now you can put a.
I didn't even think of that.
You can put a. I've got a buddy that bought a ranch down in South Texas on a ranch that we had shot. And our Senderos were still there, he's used those as he's cleaned them up, used some of his roads, but you know he's got a feeder at every intersection, and he's got stands down the road.
Really cool.
It's pretty neat. So,
well, that's the end of the conception part of the show, and we're going to now drive down into the drill down section. As we drill down into our reservoirs, we also drill down into the show, and we're going to go into kind of the success and the details along the way of how big and how crazy it was to live through that success of geophysics and Dawson. But before that, we want to give a shout out to our drill down segment sponsor, and we're going to do that right now. All right, so entering the drill down segment of the show, when people think of Dawson Geophysical, I feel like people in general, not in the industry, but in general, like my dad's like, I saw a Dawson Geophysical truck in Oregon. What are they doing out there? You guys are shooting everywhere. It seems like Dawson Geophysical is the company when it comes to shaking on the ground and getting some visual of the subsurface. Is that true or not true in America?
Well, we have positioned ourselves some by our own doing and some by the doing of others to themselves. We've ended up being the largest in the U.S. today, and so we're probably the largest in North America. If you take the Canadian operation now, how do you want to measure that? Do you measure it and from a contractor, pure play contractor standpoint, do you measure it in channels? Do you measure it in number of crews operating? Do you measure it in revenue? I think in all those, we're probably the leader.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
It's not where we want it to be. I mean, it's not. We didn't wake up one day and say we want to be the largest. Decker told me one time, he said, I remember we weren't even the fourth largest in Midland County. And here we are as the, quote, industry leader. And we got there, I think, by Decker over the years, just not doing anything incredibly stupid. And
I love that saying.
The four-letter word of the seismic industry as a contractor is debt. If you have it, this is a very cyclical business.
Right.
Decker used to say, he'd point at the telephone, he'd say, our whole world can change with one time when that thing rings, good or bad. And so the company was founded to be fiscally conservative. We're not afraid of debt, but we kind of follow the Rockefeller mode. Don't take on more debt that you can pay back in 1 year's cash flow.
Wow.
And so we don't.
Wow, that's a really good rule of thumb.
We don't leverage the future. And so sometimes that means you have to say no. Sometimes that means you can't be everything to everybody. We're in a position now that we are put in a position where we kind of have to be that for people, and it's not really where we want to be.
Yeah.
So, and so, you know, I had a very unique situation. I tell people when I became president of the company, it was like being 16 years old. Your dad hands you the keys to a Mercedes, and all he says is, "Don't wreck it."
It's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Right?
You just
That's so. All I had to do early on was maintain.
Sure.
And when I first took the job as president, Decker said, "You've got the income statement, I've got the balance sheet." I didn't know what that meant. Well, now I know.
What does that mean?
He wasn't going to let me spend all the money. Right? You make sure you're getting revenue and controlling expenses. If you need something,
come to me.
Yeah.
But you're not going to, and so it was a process of how we got there. But I had one advantage over Decker. There'll never be another Decker Dawson. I never claimed to be. I said this at his eulogy. I never claimed to be Decker Dawson. I always wanted to maintain his beliefs, his philosophy, and his business, but I could do something he couldn't do. I could leverage his name.
Whoa.
I could take his name and run with it. Sure. It wasn't in his nature to do that. Mm-hmm. We are so different. I mean, he used to tell me all the time I never wanted to go to cocktail parties and tell people how many crews I ran and how many countries I was working in. I was perfectly happy with nobody noticing.
But you'd be glad to say it.
But I could say it. Yeah. I could go say we are Dawson. He can't. I mean, he could, but he wasn't cut out of that, right?
Yeah.
No, and so I had a balance sheet. I had a great company, had great people, and I had a great name. And we began to expand a little bit outside the Permian.
This is when you became president.
Yeah.
And what year was that?
I became president in 2002.
Oh, wow.
And became CEO in 2007.
What's the difference? Or what'd you add?
At CEO, I've got shareholder responsibility. I've got balance sheet responsibility. I've got more than just operations. I'm still involved in operations, but not to the extent I was as president. And so, Decker built a great company on being fiscally conservative, debt. You talk about R&D. We do a little of that, but Decker built a company that was really good at recognizing relevant technology to the seismic space and bringing it to the marketplace commercially, not necessarily developing it.
Yeah, early adopter is what we call them.
Right.
Hey.
Yeah. This could work, and we would kind of sift through what we didn't think was working and kind of help our clients. The company was built on a partnership relationship type of interaction with our client base. Decker he would never call them customers. He said they're clients.
Clients.
He said they're clients because we are providing a professional service to them. He said there's not a lawyer in town calls their people customers.
Yeah.
And he used to always say, we're different than Walmart in that we know our customers. That makes them clients. Walmart doesn't know them.
That's right. They don't want to.
Yeah. And, but
they know your credit card info.
So, so in my opinion, the key to our success has been founded since 1952 is stay within yourself.
Yeah.
Just don't.
Wow.
As Decker used to tell me, don't let your alligator mouth overload your hummingbird ass. I have a real hard time.
There's some golden quotes coming.
I have a real hard time with that, by the way.
Man, I mean, what an exciting thing to be a part of. What an exciting time in the industry as we're developing in geophysics in those years so much, and we're developing in our ability to bring hydrocarbon out of the ground. If the unconventionals never happened, what a different industry it would be if we weren't able to go sideways and frack and do what we do. What an amazing time. I mean, I imagine you at some point between 2002 and now, there had to have been some year it was like Metallica in the 90s and you're just wrecking hotel rooms. And
yes. Yes. The industry, I have seen our industry go through different things. I had come into the industry in my career shortly after the digital revolution, when we were actually recording digital signals. Now, the digitizing was done with the recording truck. It wasn't done on the ground like it is now. But prior to that, it was all analog. I mean, I should have brought this. I had it out and I forgot. I could have brought you. I could have brought you a seismic survey from 1959 and showed you what it looked like. And it's just wiggles. And so then the industry has gone through different changes. We had the 3D revolution in the early 90s, and so that was a rock star phase, right? You're out raising money in 94, 97, selling stock. I mean, you're the premier technology. 3D was in every E&P company's investor book.
Wow.
How much 3D they were going. Now it's how many ducks they have. Or it went from that to acres, and then it went to drillable locations. And so there's a different
recoverable,
metric.
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. And the change really occurred in about 2004 when they really started doing. Mitchell started doing work in Wise County.
George Mitchell.
Yeah, and they were drilling horizontal in Wise County natural gas stuff.
The Barnett stuff.
Yeah, the Barnett stuff. And I remember walking around Midland and people saying, "Hey, Jump, you see they're starting to do this horizontal stuff in the Barnett. They don't need seismic anymore. What are you guys going to do for a living?" I said, "Well, I mean, we're not quite buggy whips, but we're close, I guess." A year later, we had 5 crews working in Wise County.
Wow.
Because they figured they weren't large channel count crews, but they figured out that thing was structurally more complicated than they thought it was.
Sure
No.
is.
Would never have guessed.
And all of a sudden, Barnett, all of a sudden, Haynesville, Marcellus, Woodford, all those areas.
Yep.
All of a sudden, we're not doing anything in the Permian. So the Permian basically went unshot from the mid-'90s to about 5 years ago.
What?
There was anything. There was very little going on.
Well, I knew about the exodus of the majors, but nothing was shot.
Everything we were doing was back east. It was all natural gas, unconventional. Now, you know, our stock hit $60-something in 07. You know, we were a big deal at investor conferences. Everything was turning to gold, but
08.
We had 08 hit. 08 hit. The world changed. Then we retreat back to oil, and we come back to the Permian, and the primary use for seismic data had changed. It had been an exploration tool, right? Mm-hmm. It was unconventional.
Right.
And it was an indicator of where to drill.
Right.
Yep.
Drill here, here's a high, here's a fault, here's a trapping mechanism. All of a sudden, when we got into the natural gas unconventionals, we became a where not to drill tool. We were looking for all
shallow hazards, whatever hazard.
Geohazard assessment, right? That's still important out here in West Texas, but it's not as important as the Barnett, for example, right? Where you're going to go completely through a zone. So early use out here in the Permian was still geohazard assessment. Make sure karsting, dip rate, faults. The science is just now starting to record surveys with rich enough attributes that lend themselves to analytics to be a where to drill tool. That's where the industry has to get back to. Right. We have to be more the guys collecting the data, the guys processing the data, and the guys that are interpreting the data, geosteering, doing those types of things, have to be able to tell people where's the best place to land this thing.
Yeah. Right.
Not just avoid that fault or avoid this. For us to get our seat at the table, which we gave up as an industry, we've got to be able to prove ourselves, and we're getting there. I think we're getting there as an industry.
I think it's definitely coming back.
It is.
I think that turn from the mining operation back to G&G is happening right now.
Absolutely.
I definitely think
it just makes sense that, you know, it takes a little bit of time to shoot seismic. I mean, you think about the cost of seismic data.
Right.
It's $85 an acre.
It's a well.
It's $85 an acre.
That's interesting.
It's one Wolfcamp well in Reeves.
Yeah, it's $85 an acre. And what do you mean you ain't got it? Yeah. All right? It's $85 an acre. It's an insurance policy.
Sure.
Is it going to be 100% successful? No. Is it going to mitigate risk?
Is it going itself to off?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yes. It's going to keep you from doing one really wish you hadn't done that deal. Now we're back to to one well. And so the problem is the delivery time from shooting to processing to PSDM takes time. It can't change it doesn't change the narrative every quarter. What we do today, you guys are going to be looking at 9 months from now.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And so we've got to get the inventory of data out there, which we're getting, that now you guys have that data. You've got the historical 2 or 3 years of drilling.
Right.
You've got the analogs. Now you can use it more as a predictor. And you know, its success rate doesn't have to be 100%. It just has to save one.
Yeah.
Right?
But at the end of the day, also, it's the interpreter behind that seismic data, right?
Yeah.
If the power of that interpreter, the one who's actually able to say, I can predict the natural fractures here based on these elements of either
But you're going to need everybody in the room.
Oh, of course.
Got to.
I mean, somehow you got to be able to talk to engineers, right?
Seismic can do it.
And I've got one son that's an engineer and one's a geophysicist. I've broke up more fights at Christmas time over which one's more valuable than the other. Right? And the petrophysicist, the geologist,
reservoir engineer, or
he's
petroleum in general.
He was drilling at the time. Now he's more on the well servicing side.
Okay,
but
cool.
But yeah, drilling. Drilling in petrophysics. That must be. I'd like to record that.
Yeah, we could have a dinner. We could have a Thanksgiving dinner at the PBE podcast with Jumper and the Jumper family. I think that was.
That's. It might as well go on Jerry Springer.
All right, I think that is the end. I think we came to a great end of the drill down segment. We got some great insight. I mean, unbelievable knowledge that has been recorded in these microphones, and we can't thank you enough to just being open to talk about that and your experiences with those mentors and those gems that you laid down. It was awesome. So with that being said, we're going to drive it right into the completion segment of the show, and we're going to take a minute to thank our completion sponsor for this show. Let's go into the IFF just for a minute.
Sure. Yeah, it's an organization for nonprofit for combat veterans. We're trying to focus right now just on local Permian guys. We're trying to do Will Cannon, the guy that I found this with, was in the Army. And we'd both done a lot of nonprofit work with the majors like Wounded Warrior and Phoenix Patriot and other organizations like that. And we had an idea to do something different to try to impact people in a different way, where we isolate guys in a local area. That way, and whatever the trips are, if it's kayaking, hiking, or anything, we completely outfit those guys so they get all the gear they need to recreate that experience whenever they want to. And they don't have to rely on the centralized, oversight committee to call them up when they have like a free spot or something.
How do you find these guys? How do they get a part of this?
That's been the challenge, especially moving out here, since neither Will or myself is from the Permian Basin. We both ended up here and we love it here. So we wanted to start here and this be our flagship. It's really word of mouth of guys You'd be surprised how small the community is once you start talking. It's just like the oil and gas. But that's our thing now. Our donations are getting so big. We've got huge sponsors like Yeti, Vibe Kayaks, Ultima Boots, Devil's River Whiskey. So we're starting to get the funding we need to we have more money than veterans now, which is a beautiful thing. Because for the first couple of years we were doing this, it was just fighting for scraps. And honestly, lately it's just exploded, and we can't be more proud, man. I mean, every one of us gets beat the hell up. You got bruises, rock rash. That's the point, man, because you got to rely on each other.
Yeah.
I mean, and just the teamwork it takes to get through. You kind of get that back in that mindset of when you're in. So when you get back, it's not like some guy you met, you shook hands with in a photo. It's like, shit, I remember I busted my ass on that rock and you grabbed my paddle, so it ended up floating down the river or whatever.
Right.
So that way when they call up on a Tuesday, Wednesday, they're not strangers or a name on a piece of paper. Like, these guys know each other.
Yeah.
And the testimonials we've got are amazing.
Conception segment of the show.
Completion.
I'm sorry, the completion segment of the show. I gotta
say, we're not starting over, are we? I ain't doing
Run it back.
I'm not doing a take two.
Son of a gun. All right. This is the completion segment of the show. And man, we have talked about all kinds of things that got us into this show. And to talk about completion of this show is going to be a challenge. We have talked about really, really good stuff, from the end product of increasing resolution of our seismic data to make better wells, to the beginning of it all for Steve Jumper. But we're going to start it with the fact that Mr. Jumper went to undergrad with the fellow that everyone might be familiar with.
He was there when I was there. I didn't know him, but he was there. He was a year behind me.
He's a geophysicist. He got his degree in geophysics, right?
He did. Got a degree in geology geophysics. Went to work for Western Geophysical as a data processor. I will note that I started as a data processor, because you can tell anybody that graduated in that time frame went to data processing. But this cat was a little more successful than me.
He was in his mom's basement, stirring up some liquid.
Making some, on the side, he would make vodka, which like a good seismic guy would do. And lo and behold, he's Tito.
He turns into Tito's vodka.
Yep.
Tito's vodka came from a geophysicist. I have
so much more respect for Tito's now.
Yeah, he was a data processor, Western Geophysical, degree from University of Texas, and said, "To hell with that. This looks pretty good." You know what he did? He said, "I can make this and I can sell this to seismic guys."
Yep.
That's a brilliant marketing
$1 billion
He's like,
worth.
I already have the customer base for this.
I know a bunch of guys out there that have alcohol problems already. I don't know what that has to do with this show, but
It's a good fun fact. Nobody knew that the Tito's guy was a geophysicist. And if you ever go to the Tittlemeyer compound, you are having a house special, and it is always made with Tito's.
Always.
there you go.
And maybe he can sponsor the show. We're going to reach out to him on behalf of Steve Jumper.
They are.
We're gonna name drop.
Tito's vodka is on airplanes. I'm telling you, it's even in Canada, and it's impossible because the government controls all the liquor, and so the government buys it and distributes it. You can't just go in and sell it at the liquor store. The fact that Tito's vodka is in Canada is unbelievable. So they're good.
I wonder if we can get him on the show. We probably could. We're going to reach out for that.
He's worth $2.5 billion. Dollars.
No, we'll
That's
get some of that.
$2.5 billion more than what I'm worth.
I'll tell you a funny story. We're on a road show in 1997 selling stock, and we got this young banker with us, and Decker and I are in the limo. And this young banker used to tell, he would like to tell Decker, the next fund we're going, that how much money they manage, and this guy manages $2 billion, this guy does this, and it just went on for days. And finally, he says, "We're gonna go see somebody. They manage $4 billion."
Was this in Houston or New York?
New York. Okay. Decker looks at me and he says, "I'm so damn old. I remember when $1 billion was a lot of money." That banker never said another word.
I bet that kid. Yeah.
Oh,
damn!
What I'd pay to say that to a banker, probably a couple $1 billion. But
have you ever decided to go in and put some money in on some wells? Have you ever done some private?
Not allowed to.
Oh, no shit.
No, we're not allowed to. We're not allowed to have it.
What?
We can have it's in our corporate
non-compete or something?
Well, we just, we have some folks that have inherited and maybe have some non-op royalty type interests, but in terms of being in actively participating on the gas deals, we're not allowed to as an officer or a director of the company.
Okay.
And so that makes it really hard to find directors, right?
Yeah.
And we have some that aren't actively involved in it, but they've been in the past. That goes back to the days when, every time the seismic industry goes through something a little bit difficult, the model changes, and someone says, "This would be a good idea." And one of them that was floating around in the 90s, where there were several companies set up that were in a shoot-to-earn type setup, where if you'll shoot the seismic, you can buy in. Of course, the world's different today. The world now is, first of all, nobody in the unconventional is going to take a small investor, number one. Number two, nothing's secret anymore. I mean, the shoots are big. Everybody knows what's going on.
Right.
But back 30 years ago, the way the model was, someone would go out, they'd have an idea, they'd shoot they'd shoot seismic. If it's proved up, they would go lease it. It was idea, seismic, lease, drill. Now it's lease, drill, seismic, right? And so it's not a big of a deal now, right?
Yeah.
It's an acreage game now. It used to be a prospect game, and the theory was drilling contractors could get away with that. If you look at a lot of the E&P companies started out as drilling contractors, and they would drill for interest. Well, you're drilling
that
a
makes
6-inch.
A lot of sense.
Yeah,
well, you're drilling a 6-inch hole as part of your partnership. If you're in the seismic business and I've got a 10 square mile survey, I'm seeing your data, I'm seeing your data, and I'm seeing your acreage.
Right.
I'm kind of in a potential conflict of interest. And so in the 90s, there were some companies that tried that. PGS did it offshore, Sitel did it onshore. A few others actually were going to had an E&P arm, and they just Schlumberger did it. It just never really worked.
Wow.
And so,
why didn't Dawson do it?
No super dumb ideas.
No, incredibly dumb ideas.
Incredibly dumb ideas.
Decker just was not going to have any conflict. It's the reason why he never wanted, aside from the fact that being a contractor and then being in the multi-client business is a bad business model, just to use your crews to go shoot data that you hope you can sell. as Decker would say, the geophysical graveyards are full of people that tried that. He considered it a conflict of interest because we would be competing with our clients who are E&P companies as well as multi-client companies.
And on top of that, like how you describe the model working now, right? If you seismic isn't used for exploration anymore.
Right.
In the Permian, it's used for exploitation.
That's right.
That's the thing. So if someone's shooting seismic, it's, hey, we need to really figure out the structure. We need to figure out how the fractures are propagating through this area.
And nobody wants a small investor on a $10 million well, right?
Exactly.
I mean, back when the wells were 1.5 to drill and complete on a conventional well, you get someone that wants to put in, 10% guys, $150,000, right? Mm-hmm. That's a meaningful investment. But, nobody's, I mean, the model just doesn't lend itself. Now, if you were back in conventional stuff, maybe that, and I think there'll be some conventional stuff come back.
Oh, absolutely.
I think there's kind of a shift now back towards conventional, a little bit. Bite my tongue a little bit.
Yeah, it's starting to grow. I mean, it's starting to get interesting.
Our man over here asked me a question earlier, and we were offline about getting and I'm sorry to go off script here, but getting the bend size tighter than 41 1/4. Mm-hmm. What's preventing us from doing that? Scale.
What do you mean?
It takes too many channels.
Oh, shit.
Right? Ooh. And so if you're going to shoot these big multi-100 square mile surveys, density and aerial extent drive channel count. That's why we're up to 35 and 40,000 channels. We're getting them at 82.5.
How can you
It just physically...
that?
When we went cableless, everybody said, channel count won't matter. It will matter when you're trying to cram all that data through a transcriber.
Got to have that coverage.
Right? And so to get the tight spacing, we've got to be a little bit creative on that. Landowners don't want vibrators out there real tight. So getting it, the tighter you get, the more footprint you have, right? Mm-hmm. And the more channels you need, the more footprint. I think there will come a time when the E&P companies will begin to target 3D things underneath these large surveys that they're participating in, which I think are a great idea for everybody. But to get some things really tight, if you have an area that you think you really need something really tight, it's going to be 25, 30, 50 square mile target shoots, right? That will facilitate much tighter grids.
Right.
But you don't want to blanket the whole...
that way.
A 500 square mile survey like that, you don't need to. But if you get an area where you got a drilling program, multi-well pads, multi-pads going in, it might lend itself if we can prove that as a science and an industry that we deserve a seat at the table, and we show some success, which I'm confident this younger generation is going to do. Just by watching the analytics that I see my son doing, for example, things that we didn't even dream about when we got in the business. Hell, in 1981 there were 750 crews in the United States. Total of about 72,000 channels. Think about that. We own 200,000 channels by ourselves. We are 3 times the size of the industry was in 81. So you think about the data that we can put out now, it's usable. Mm-hmm. Once we get a seat at the table, and I'm confident that we will, particularly when there's pressure on returns and drilling good wells, there will be room for target shooting. Those may be 9C surveys using shear wave vibrators. Mm-hmm. They may be tighter grids. But the E&Ps are going to have to re-enter some of that and do some of that standalone to really unravel what get to where
the complexities
what
of
they
we're going to
have
to be, right? And so you may get to 20-foot bend spacing.
Yeah.
But you're not going to get a 500 square mile that way. But nobody can afford it.
Does it affect your acquisition design at any point?
Well, we're going to have to be creative on how we use the vibes. We did a survey out here northwest northeast of town. I'm not very good directionally. But we were getting 4,800 VPs a day. Simultaneous sourcing, fire at will, just ready to go. Wow. Middle East type stuff. You're going to have to do those kind of things to get to get the production up to make it cost effective and timely.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
but
It's like 2 wells worth.
Yeah.
yeah, that's where a company like Fasken, for example, they own the surface, so they have more flexibility to do things on the surface than someone that doesn't own the surface can do.
Right.
And it's kind of the beauty of that company too, is just they have the time to let everyone else figure it out, and then they can go in and just optimize
Oh man,
it.
they got optimum time. Okay,
Sorry, I got you off script.
No, not off
There
script.
are
at all, man.
zero scripts
There's
here.
zero
The script
script
is
here.
a
Oh, wait.
theory.
There is. Okay, let's end the completion part of this show with this question for Jumper. My question is, what is wrong with the industry today? What's wrong with the industry today?
Well, that's there's a lot in that in that question.
Yes, there is.
From a contractor standpoint, there's a lot of financial distress left in this industry. Our balance sheet is great, but we have up and down quarter. You look at our results, we'll have a decent quarter where we're generating some cash, and then we'll have one where we don't. The problem is that the surveys are getting so big, the ability to get them ready in a timely manner to maintain utilization. The seismic industry is based on utilization, keeping crews busy. The up and down, it's a 60, 80, 100-man crew. When they're down for 3 weeks or a month, that makes it tough. Long term, the biggest issue is there's nobody in the seismic space on the contractor side that's generating enough cash to fund the next level of equipment and technology.
Wow.
We're not unique in that.
Okay.
If you look at the pressure pumping world and you look at the drilling world, they're under pressure too. They're not under. They live with more long-term agreements, right?
Yeah.
They have more take-or-pay contracts, and so if you go back to 2016 and stuff, when H&P had all those rigs stacked up in Odessa.
Yeah, I remember that.
Remember how bad that looked?
The graveyard, yeah.
A bunch of them were on long-term deals, right?
Whoa, how does that work?
They were cold stacked under agreement. So, the drilling contractors have the ability to, if you don't, it's take or pay. You don't use them, doesn't matter. Seismic's never been able to do that. We've been able to enter into some longer term agreements, day rate type stuff. We did many years ago with Chesapeake, but everything's turnkey, which is fine. Everything's pressure for faster, cheaper, and better. I don't like the way that sounds, so I always say higher resolution images more cost effectively in a shorter cycle time. Doesn't that sound better, Robin?
Yep.
Than just faster, cheaper, better.
Robin approves.
But you look at how they're trying to get through the drilling phase, and they all went to electric top drives. They went through that. We went through that with cableless. Pressure pumping's about to go there with electric. Horsepower. It's more efficient, more cost effective, less downtime.
We have to get there.
The problem across the service space, and it's probably amplified in the geophysical sector more so than the others, is there's just not the cash flow right now to recapitalize and re-equip with stuff. And so it's a real serious situation.
Yeah, it is.
And particularly when you look at the number of companies that are offering these services is very limited. And you look at the varying financial positions of some of these companies. It's a really bizarre time because the geophysical space is doing some of the most exciting, creative things I've seen my whole career.
Absolutely.
And
the way that people are able to leverage the data
it's
is
just
phenomenal.
not, I'll tell you the real issue.
Let's hear it.
We lost the narrative. We started talking about cost, and we quit talking about value. That's the real problem in the seismic space.
Damn.
We became very efficient. We have gotten ourselves to where we shoot things faster than we can permit it and survey it. So the crew time is actually very small, and we're under such heavy pressure as an industry, as all our services, to cost. And we lost the conversation in the industry of value. I personally believe the seismic space, the seismic method, the seismic data brings more value to the E&P sector than any other single science they deal with. And we don't get paid for it. And that's not all. That's not, we're as guilty. Cloyce Talbot told me one time years ago during a downturn, we were talking about services, and he said, E&P companies don't cut prices, contractors do.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you lose, and I think this is a real serious issue inside E&P companies, outside E&P companies in the space, we have to start talking again in about value. People will pay for value.
That's right. Absolutely.
But you have to prove the value.
There you go.
Unfortunately, either by not having the proper opportunity at the right time in the unconventionals, or the fact that maybe we haven't been as successful as we need to be, we haven't been able to lead to that value conversation. I personally believe we're going to get there. I personally believe the industry will continue to create value for the end user. It'll be recognized, and we'll get paid. I'll go back to this. It's $85 an acre.
Right.
All in. And so I understand capital budgets.
Right.
I understand how tight they are.
Right.
I get all that.
You're drilling a $10 million well, though.
If you're telling me I can buy a lease in the Permian for $85 an acre.
Right. Think about it. Just think about it. I mean, you're absolutely
right. But here's the
difference.
We throw that out there, and then everybody goes, well, it makes perfect sense. Here's a problem. $30,000 an acre for a lease is a capital item. $85 an acre is an operating expense. So there's a difference, right?
Well, and then you can also flip it and say, hey, you're get the rig monster out there. You're chasing your CDC clause, and you're just trying to hold that thing, and you're trying to drill up every bench you can before that lease goes out.
Yep.
Tell me that operating cost. You don't need to say that. I'll say that.
Yeah. I love the science. I love the people.
Yes, we do.
I love the business. I love the folks we deal with. The seismic industry has its challenges. I still think that we're giving the industry the best attributes they can to be 100%. Successful. It's just going to be a matter of time as we continue to develop and gain knowledge that we'll get into the value chain, and that's where somehow this industry always seems to find itself again, and
we will,
and we will. So.
All right, here's my interpretation for this whole conversation and this end of the whole thing, if you guys will allow me. Seismic data and what you have done over the years at Dawson Geophysical in the ability to measure with a sound wave the complexity of these unconventionals, the complexity of the subsurface. You have driven the technical team and the technical interpretations to a point at which we can't quite understand what's going on, and we're challenging you and challenging the industry to get better at that resolution. Right. We need better data. I'm going to tell you right now, and you can mark my words if you want to, or you can call me bullshit, but the technical people, the people who actually are trying and trying to discover what the hell is going on, is going to catch up. So what I would advise Dawson Geophysical to do is to master the ability to continue to deliver the best quality data that you can deliver today, because we on the technical side are going to catch up, and what you're delivering today is actually everything we need. It's just we don't understand what we're looking at.
That's right.
We're asking you to tell us the answers. We don't understand the answers. One day we will understand the answers. Don't stress yourself on trying to get better and increase and take on debt. Fuck that. Leave that to somebody else.
We got to fire it up now.
Yeah.
That's that Jaeger talking. I knew we'd get there.
Excuse me. You're right.
That's exactly how I got run off a seismic crew right there.
Listen, keep doing what you're doing and optimize
that.
it and make it just you keep being the best at what you're doing, because we will catch up and we will do what you're saying. We will rise to the occasion, and we will joint this thing, and we will make sense of the subsurface, and we will all make money efficiently.
You want a marketing job?
No, this is it. This is it. Steve Jumper, sir.
Appreciate it,
I
guys.
cannot
Thank you.
believe the
I'm glad we
show.
finally got here.
Come on, man. I thank you so much for being here. Anything else, boys? What do we got? Here we go? Is this it?
Robin's good.
Here we go.
Robin's good.
Wow.
He's got some
Sorry,
homework
dude.
to do. Oh man, Robin, you did great today. And we out.
All right, thanks.